This is the Kaizen Way, the show dedicated entirely to continuous improvement. Join us every Thursday for new episodes on popular platforms like Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and Google Podcasts. This show is proudly sponsored by Modern Kaizen LLC, your one-stop shop for robust training solutions for soft and even most specialized of skills. Find them on the web at modernkaizen.com and all major social media platforms. We thank you for joining us. Now, without further ado, here's your host, Mike Monroe.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Kaizen Way. This is Mike Monroe, your host. I'm joined today by the absolutely legendary Dr. Mark Rodgers. We're super excited to have him on the show. He has some great experience that he wants to share with you. I'm super excited to hear more about his journey. So without further ado, let's get underway. Excellent. So Mark, it's super great to have you here. Do you prefer Mark, or is Dr. Rodgers the best way to address you?
No, Mark is totally fine with me. At home, I'm Dad or Hey you. It's fine. Mark is fine. So.
I love it. You're telling us all that ultimately you're as approachable as you are knowledgeable.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I try.
So I'm super excited to have you. So let's get underway. So if you could tell me a little bit about your role in the continuous improvement world, and then give me something unique about you, something that really defines you in your spirit.
Sure. So, Mike, thanks for having me on. First and foremost, it's a pleasure to be here and great to get to know you over the last few months and work with you a little bit. So my role in the continuous improvement space right now is about 90% academic and 10% practitioner oriented. So I am an assistant professor of supply chain management at the Rodgers Business School, and I'm a tenure track faculty member there. I have a doctorate in industrial and systems engineering, and part of my motivation to pursue an academic career actually stems from my early experiences as, a practitioner or a junior engineer, if you will, where I got my first exposure to Lean Six Sigma, running a couple of continuous improvement projects. And it really was kind of my catalytic moment to go back to graduate school because I wanted to learn more about that and be able to contribute to the body of knowledge. So these days, most of my work is related to large-scale systems optimization from a quantitative perspective, and also some process improvement work research-wise as well. And on the practitioner side, obviously, that I've been working with Modern Kaizen a little bit on some courses and some projects here and there, just to stay connected and try to leverage some of my nerdy expertise kind of on the analytical side to see how we can tease out insights to improve and lead to business improvements and such. So that's me kind of in a nutshell. But as far as something that's, I guess, unique about me, in addition to being a nerd, I also am a washed up basketball player. I'm an insufferable New York Knicks fan, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. So take that how you will. But it's something for me that I've been a Knicks fan for my entire life, been a basketball fan forever, had the opportunity to, on my way home from Miami yesterday, catch a little bit of LeBron's passing of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the all-time scoring list. So that was a really cool moment for me, since, LeBron and I are the same age. So kind of growing up, he was kind of like the guy in high school, and still is the guy for everyone now. But it's cool to see, how he's become this global icon that we had a lot of pressure on him growing up, as a kid, and he's shattered everybody's expectations. So I am a big hoops fan, and hope that sticks around, even though my body won't let me play anymore. But still like to follow along and, from afar. So.
Beautiful. Actually, I was going to bring up LeBron if you didn't, because that was a pretty amazing feat. And I know sports is really any sport is a great example of continuous improvement and the pressures that can be brought upon you. But that idea of the Kaizen way of just continuously improving and really taking it beyond what anybody thought. Because I mean, even I know with Kareem there, people were saying that record was never going to be broken, and
right.
Here we are with LeBron. Yeah. I mean, that was a really big thing. So, you said something in your thought there, and I appreciate that you're a big basketball fan. But you said something that I really loved, and I love the language specifically, which is that catalytic transition there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so as we go into the heart of the show here, tell me a little bit about the journey, or a lot of bit about the journey, into continuous improvement, and more importantly, where you made the decision to get out of the practitioner world and into the academia world.
Yeah, so early in my career, I took on an engineering role at a major pharmaceutical company, Bristol Myers Squibb. Worked in a manufacturing kind of role, like a troubleshooting role, kind of more of a chemical engineering type of role, and transitioned into a supply chain planning role in clinical supplies. And that's where I had the opportunity to lead my first Six Sigma project. I led a Greenbelt project there. And for me, I had always been being an engineer, had always been inclined or leaned towards more of the technical projects. And it was my first exposure to a body of knowledge that kind of combined the technical world and the managerial space. And it was something that was really interesting for me. And at that time, I guess you can call it my quarter life crisis. I was trying to figure out what's next for me. I had actually just finished a master's degree as well. And Lean Six Sigma was kind of that body of knowledge that's really interesting to me that I wanted to learn more about, and decided to pursue a PhD in industrial engineering at Rutgers University. And I think for me at that time, and for academics at that time, a lot of that body of knowledge and that expertise was in an engineering curriculum. Now it's much different. A lot of schools, it's in a business school now. But that transition for me was really motivated by just being curious. And, as I learned more and executed projects, I got really curious about the statistical techniques, how we can use those to improve performance. And I wanted to expand my knowledge in that space. And, kind of around my third year of my PhD, I had taken quite a bit of statistics classes and a bunch of operations research classes. And I saw some opportunity to kind of blend the two spaces together technically, because operations research kind of leverages probability and constraint optimization together. And I thought to myself, wow, would be really powerful if we could leverage these two techniques together to drive performance, because they're coming at the problems from separate angles. Even though they're both very technical, they can lead to some really strong managerial insights. So, decided to move forward with that, and expanded my expertise really in the optimization space, more so than the statistical space. And that became, in addition to that, became like a core competency for me. And, took on several consulting roles, and even was a data scientist for a little bit at Verizon, which was really cool. And got to see that in practice, how some of those analytical techniques can improve a business. And ultimately got the itch to join the faculty back at my alma mater here in the business school. And that felt kind of right for me, in a sense that, I did want to strike that balance between the academic audience and the practitioner audience by solving problems that are motivated by challenges that are faced in industry. So for me, there was kind of the right move, and the right opportunity came about at the right time for me. So I decided to make a move into academia full time.
That's awesome. And I think it's a beautiful thing that ultimately you ended up back at your alma mater, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of folks in the education space always try to aim to end up at their alma mater. A lot of times they come up short, but I think that's really amazing that, you ended up at Rutgers School of Business after graduating from Rutgers. I think that's a really amazing transition there. They must have made an impression on you, right? Shameless plug for Rutgers.
Yeah, shameless plug for RBS. No, but it was Rutgers is a massive institution in New Jersey, and I did my undergraduate and graduate education in New Brunswick, which is a separate institution, and then now my appointment now is in Newark, New Jersey. Even though I do teach on my old campus back every once in a while. But it's cool to just kind of be involved and see the university from a different perspective. So, and even from getting involved in different campuses and seeing that, it's just exciting to see. And, getting to learn more about the university every day. So
That's awesome. I love it, and I especially love that your perspective is from academia, and it's the expertise that you bring is leveraged from the professional practice of
mhm.
methodologies. Um, I've worked a lot with business. I've especially worked a lot with business and academia over the years, and I've noticed that there's this disparity or a major gap between the perspectives of both
Mhm.
organizations, right? And from
Right.
your last answer to your journey and telling us a little bit about how you ended up in this field, it sounded to me that you're really good at building bridges, right? So
I try.
what I'm really
Yeah.
curious about is, what advice could you give to help build that bridge to be able to, number one, ultimately have a better understanding on both sides, but then similarly to build the bridge to the school, because a lot of times business and school are completely separate. And it's ironic because the schools usually offer a lot of really great resources that would ultimately add to the bottom line of the professional
Sure.
practice. So talk about that bridge and where maybe those opportunities are.
Sure. So, kind of having spent time in both spaces, I've noticed that academics and practitioners are motivated by two separate, totally different things. Practitioners want to be able to satisfy customer needs, boost their value to shareholders, whereas academics are motivated by creating knowledge and publications, and more about making a contribution to a body of knowledge, right? So, it's not necessarily about, doing things better, faster, quicker. It's about what are the gaps that are available that are not being studied right now, and how can we plug those holes and make a contribution. So, um, I think being in a business school, and it's kind of given me a unique perspective on that gap. I think the problems that I solve run the gamut, and kind of the industries I work run the gamut, from continuous improvement, and even the energy sector is kind of where I've done a lot of work there, and sustainability. Um, these types of problems are often motivated by practitioner audiences, right? And you know, when you have technical skills and folks that have really strong quantitative brains and even qualitative brains, it's as you alluded to, it's really critical that the practitioner audience kind of looks into the academic space and kind of starts to realize the things that they need and the skills that academics can offer. Sometimes academics don't know that the work that they do could benefit somebody. If you work in a purely theoretical space, you're so focused on getting us an equation to converge faster, but that convergence quicker might actually mean a cycle time reduction on the practitioner side, right? But we don't necessarily always have that relationship. So, I'm kind of an anomaly in academia because I spent a lot of time in industry and then went back for my PhD. And so I can kind of see both sides of the equation. But I think, it kind of behooves both sides of that argument to really take a look at each other and say, okay, how can academics utilize the needs of practitioners to motivate their research, right? And how can practitioners leverage the skills of academics to improve their processes and maybe, leverage new tools that are kind of cutting edge that we didn't realize even existed, right? So it's kind of this two-way conversation that you kind of have to find the mutual need on both sides, to kind of make that marriage work really well.
Well said. And I think ultimately, and you kind of touched on this, is that you have two entities that are essentially working in their separate silos.
Mm-hmm.
And without the knowledge of either or, there can't be any change. So
Right.
I would say, to any, especially practitioner or business that may be listening to the show here, I
Mm-hmm.
cannot stress enough how important it is for leadership to reach out to some of these higher education institutions and just have the conversation. because the higher education institutions really want to learn more from the business community. And I'm sure you can attest to this, being
Mhm.
a professor, that there's a lot of times, you're asking these questions of, what are they utilizing today? Um, are there new technologies on their market? Things of that nature. And more importantly, you can't answer those questions unless you communicate.
Right.
So
For sure.
it's it's amazing through all my years in the chamber, that how frequently the answer to the question is ultimately, well, have you ever actually talked to these folks? And a
Yeah.
lot of times that's actually what the root cause is that they've never either felt comfortable making the phone call to build the bridge, and that's on both sides, or both are
Mhm.
just so focused on what they're doing in the silos that that opportunity gets missed. So I cannot stress it enough. That's something that's a big passion of mine, and I've noticed over the years that the businesses that do actively tap into those higher education resources tend to
Mhm.
really improve at a much more rapid rate, in a really amazing way that creates kind of a community culture across the company there. So thank you for that. That was one of the
Sure.
biggest things from your perspective that I was really hoping to lean on is, getting that bridge of the gap there. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for that, Mark.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
so tell me about how important mindset is when, either making connections, I guess on an overall, but then, really kind of drill it down if you could, how important is mindset when it comes to continuous improvement?
I think your mindset is most of the battle, right? You can overcome technical expertise by taking courses or YouTube, however you want to educate yourself. You can bridge technical knowledge. Subject matter expertise is something that you can partner with the right people. But I think having the mindset of continuous improvement really requires you to be very introspective, and taking a hard look at yourself in the mirror and saying, here's where I am and here's where I want to be. What do I need to do to get there? And then there's a level of humility to say, okay, I know my gaps and I know these experts. Let me talk to these people. Even if I'm a practitioner in the world of academia, I might be able to get 1% better. And that 1% could be, you know, instrumental in my development, in my growth towards, achieving my goal. Right. So, um, I'll kind of jump back to this academia versus practitioner conversation. I think we as academics need to be, more introspective, and also, be more willing to think about what's outside of our silo, right? I think, when I go to academic conferences, everybody presents on their research, and, you kind of align yourself with a specific research community, and you go back to your home institution and you kind of stay connected with your institution and your research community. But, um, you know, it really makes for powerful research if that research can help a practitioner audience grow, and vice versa, right? You can really achieve cutting edge solutions by saying, you know what, I know my business is at this place and I can get here, uh, by, maybe using a better analytical tool, or I don't have this skill set and I know that these folks do. So there's a level of humility of saying, you know what, I don't have all the answers right now, but I I know who to ask, or I'm going to try to find somebody who knows, or seek out that expertise, um, to bridge that gap. And I think, to me, that's been the biggest thing for me as far as my continuous improvement journey. I'm very strong in the quantitative space. I have some managerial skills as well, but that's kind of one of the reasons why I partnered up with Kishan, because he's very, very strong in the managerial space, right, in the leadership space. And I thought, it really makes a nice combination where we can kind of really bounce things off of each other, and it's worked really well, right? So I think finding those relationships that might not seem like directly related to your own skill set, but also outside of that, so you really have to think about yourself and think about your organization and what the organization needs and what you need to develop and how you can get there. And that takes a level of introspection and humility to get there. So it's a difficult thing to do, but sometimes you got to take a long, hard look at yourself, right, and see where those, I guess, deficiencies are, or shortcomings are. So.
And those deficiencies ultimately, like you said, are an opportunity to connect.
Right.
You were talking about your relationship with Kashan, and this bouncing back and forth. And
Mhm.
Kashan says it all the time, and it's one of the things that I really appreciate about him is that he really is aware of his deficiencies and has an abundance of confidence when it comes to reaching out to folks that are experts in the areas that are his gaps.
Right.
And it's a practice that I think a lot of us could be better at. Similarly, too, I think something else that you said that I really wanted to kind of drill down on is that percentages scale, right? And
Hmm.
even if you're making that 1%, if that 1% is on a very large number, that 1% still can move the needle quite a bit. So I think it's also
Right.
important to cherish those little wins. Now, with this, we're going to move on into the next question, and this is actually one of my favorite ones. And I think about my time with Kashan. I think about some of the things that we've done just in the short time that we've worked together. And I think Kashan in just modern Kaizen in general has kind of this outrageous, underlying brand, if you will, right? Because Kashan's a character.
Hmm.
He's bold and brazen, and he always tell you how it is, but you're laughing at the same time, right? So I think this one's kind of on brand with who we are as a company. But ultimately, Mark, what's the most outrageous way that you've ever implemented a continuous improvement initiative?
That's interesting. I'm going to try to relate this back to academia because it's probably the most recent outrageous thing that I've worked on. I had this idea that kind of stemmed from some academic readings I'd done over time, and I'd always felt that Lean Six Sigma is cutting edge, and there's a lot of areas where we can improve, but I kind of got this sense of, I got this idea to look at a project and say, well, what if we don't have any data and we still need to perform at Six Sigma? We have no way of obtaining any data, but we still need to meet a certain requirement, and we have nothing but subject matter expertise or maybe a limited knowledge. How do you leverage that? So I actually worked with a colleague of mine to come up with a way of leveraging surveys and we called it Bayesian belief networks, right? Where you can elicit information from subject matter expertise and use that probabilistically to identify a sequence of inputs and outputs that kind of get you to your end goal, and you kind of know which levers to pull. Now, it was a nasty math problem, but the intent behind it was very much, centered around how can we solve problems without data and rely on expertise and feel comfortable with the outcomes, right? So I think that was probably the weirdest thing I've ever done because it's taking a Six Sigma project, which is inherently rooted in data, right? And saying, we don't have any data. How do we solve this? How are we going to make an improvement? Which I think oftentimes as a practitioner, you probably face that, right? Where you got to make an improvement. You're not going to launch a new product, and you got to meet some sort of customer specification limits or a target, and you need to be performing robustly. But how do you do that if you don't have any baseline? And you've got to rely solely on subject matter expertise. So we found a way creatively. Bayesian belief networks are actually kind of had their roots in the legal system where you're kind of trying, going through a trial. I'm not a lawyer by any means, but kind of thought that was really cool where you're trying to make an inference based on a series of judgments and prior knowledge that may not be quantitative knowledge, but maybe it's qualitative, and translating that into a probabilistic scale, which can be really useful and insightful. So that's probably the most aloof thing I've done, is try to come up with a way to solve and achieve Lean Six Sigma projects and kind of reach the completion and make improvements without any sort of data. So I thought that was a fun project.
That is a really fun project. Is the project ongoing, or did you achieve Six Sigma?
So we actually, so this was an academic project. So we published a paper in the TQM journal. I think that was in 2019, myself and a colleague of mine. at RBS, published a paper there. So that went through numerous rounds of peer review in the academic circles. So that for the methodology part is done, and hopefully we'll be able to apply it to a real project. But it was a nice project because it had its roots in managerial academics and also the quantitative space as well, kind of blending the two to kind of contribute to that body of knowledge, right? So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to expand it. We've had some folks from clinical trials and in the healthcare space reach out and say, how do we replicate your networks so that we can make projections about the clinical trial space, which you can see there may be limited data there, right? Making projections about how a drug is going to perform. So things like that, I can see some application opportunities there, but we'll see. It's still very, in the academic space, that's newish. 2019 is kind of new. So hopefully it gains some traction and we'll be able to leverage it.
Beautiful. In that information is public. Could our listeners go in and read through that?
Yeah, that paper is published in the TQM journal. I can share a link with you afterwards, and you can. I think it is open access as well. You can take a look at it. You don't have to pay a subscription fee. I believe so, but I can confirm that.
Beautiful. Looking forward to seeing that, and I'll make sure to share that to the audience once the show is published. And
Sure.
Realistically, I think you really touched on really what the heart of this show is all about. That's the fact that the Kaizen way applies to more than what we think when we close our eyes and think about lean and think about a lot of these efficiency improvements. Is that it can be applied in more ways than just the traditional way. And more importantly, it should be applied in more ways than just the traditional way. And it takes,
Mm-hmm.
Great brains and great spirits like yours to be able to, ask those hard questions. Well, how do we quantify something that's qualitative? So I'm really looking forward to, I'm going to read the paper myself just to kind of see that journey. I think it'll be really cool. And ultimately, that was one of the biggest things I wanted to have with bringing you on the show here is that perspective in your courage to be able to ask those hard questions, and more importantly, jump down the rabbit hole and just see, hey, can we make this work? Right? Can we tell
Right.
this story when a lot of folks probably are not applying it in that sense? So that's really, really, really amazing, and I thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
sharing that. So
Thank you.
now on
Thank
that
you.
note, we're coming to the end of the show here. I always give this opportunity to our guests to do a guest promotion. So, Mark, anything you'd like to promote? Do you have a webinar or maybe some coaching? What would you like to get out to the listeners?
So in addition to my experience and interest in continuous improvement, I also have a really strong interest, and actually my dissertation research was focused around climate change and renewable energy, and trying to figure out ways we can, utilize investments to minimize emissions from the energy sector. So I'm actually hosting a webinar Friday in a couple of days. That's Wednesday now. So Friday at around noon, my time, Eastern, with some really important stakeholders in the state of New Jersey, the Board of Public Utilities, et cetera. We're going to see what their plans are, and kind of learn more about their expertise and how they plan on, implementing new technologies and their thoughts on minimizing emissions and the associated benefits of that from a human health perspective and a climate change mitigation perspective. So that's something that, is also a really strong passion of mine, and continue to do that work in addition to my continuous improvement work. But that's been a really strong passion of mine. And I hope that, hope to see you all there if you can hop on and join.
And I'll make sure to share the links to any of the resources that we covered today. And I also I think it's really amazing and important that you work for Global Logistics, which I think the general public would perceive as a detractor from environmental friendliness, and also so passionate at the same time about environmental health. So I think that it's awesome that you've been you've bridged those gaps, right? I think for the end of the show here, if you think of Dr. Mark Rodgers, you should think of bridge, right? I think if we were to sum it up, that's what he's really, really good at, is building a bridge to things that, or maybe new spaces, right? So I think that's really amazing. So we've come to the end of the show here. I want to thank everybody so very much for joining us. Most importantly, I want to thank Dr. Mark Rodgers for joining us and sharing his perspective with us. I know I learned a lot just by being in his presence. I'm looking forward to utilizing the research that he's given us, and I'll make sure to drop those links for you. And then just shameless plug alert too. I wanted to tell you, Mark, that Mark actually does a lot of work with modern Kaizen. We bring him in as a subject matter expert for some of our Lean Six Sigma projects. And I have to tell you, Mark, this has actually happened twice this week now. We've talked with some of our clients, and anytime your name comes up, you're always the recommendations and the reviews and just the feedback from the experience is so glowing. It's genuinely
That's good to
amazing.
hear.
So I hope you can you can take that, feel good about it, because seriously, I mean, literally just twice this week we've talked with clients and they've specifically referenced you by name. So
Cool.
Mark, is there how would you encourage our listeners to connect with you? Would LinkedIn be best? What's the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn is fantastic. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me, quite frankly. And those of you if you're academically inclined, you can connect with me on ResearchGate as well, which is like the academic version of LinkedIn. But LinkedIn, I'm very much active on LinkedIn, so I can be reached there. And I'll share my link with you. Mike, we're connected on LinkedIn also. So yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way to go to get a hold of me.
Beautiful. And I'll definitely tell you, Dr. Mark Rodgers is very active on LinkedIn, so I hope that you guys get a chance to follow him. So cool. On that note, once again, thank you to everybody. I'm looking forward to the premiere of this show, and I will see you all next time.
Great. Thanks, Mike.